Man, I didn't think we'd be making as many Boston Bruins related videos as we have been the past little while, but Jimmy Murphy from Boston Hockey Now just cannot stop pumping out the articles that get these discussions going. Today we are talking about the Boston Bruins and their center situation, that in which was heavily impacted by the departures of both Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci, and we're asking the question as to whether or not Tampa Bay Lightning's Steven Stamkos could be next in line for B-Town. Now, the article that we're pulling from is, again, on Boston Hockey Now, Bruins Trade Talk. Could Stamkos ever become a Bruin? This article was published a few days ago on the 15th by Jimmy Murphy, and it has some very interesting ideas attached to it. Now, just a quick update here on Stamkos. The guy did indeed miss some time due to a lower body injury that he had sustained in the Detroit Red Wings game a few nights ago. Now, up until that Red Wings game, Stamkos had 4 points in the opening 2 games of the season, 2 goals, 2 assists, and that same Red Wings game wherein he actually got the injury, he scored 2 goals himself. So, pretty good player. Steven Stamkos is 33 years old. He'll be 34 at the end of the contract he's on right now, $8.5 million a season, and he's expiring as a UFA. He was then sidelined in the next Tampa game against Ottawa with a lower body injury. He was listed as day-to-day. He missed the next game, but then came back against Vancouver and Toronto. But either way, all the talk that we had had about Stamkos potentially declining, not having that touch anymore to score as many points as he had done, so far throughout this early season he has done nothing to prove that claim right. He has been good. And if you go over to this Boston Hockey Now piece, the article opens up by asking, could disgruntled Tampa Bay Lightning... Oh, it says Tampa Lightning. Huh, that's interesting. I've never actually seen it phrased like that. Could disgruntled Tampa Lightning captain Steven Stamkos wind up playing for the Boston Bruins this season or next? When he was a UFA negotiating in 2016, the Bruins were one of the teams that came knocking to see if they could pry him away from Tampa. Numerous reports claimed at the time that the Maple Leafs and the Red Wings were the leading contenders for Stamkos if he chose to leave, but more than one source said that Bruins GM Don Sweeney made a serious push for Stamkos. And the article then brings up how some of the betting odds that are pushed out there say that Sweeney is probably going to do it again. The article then brings up a FanDuel page which insinuates the idea that the Bruins might be one of the leading contenders for Stamkos based off of the lottery odds, but the FanDuel article that is linked in this Boston Hockey Now piece goes to an entirely separate page that doesn't really have anything to do with Stamkos, so we're just going to ignore that for now. But there is also an NHL executive that's sourced out here and says this in the article: Don Sweeney pushed hard for Stamkos that year in 2016, as well as 2 years later for John Tavares, an NHL executive source recalled to Boston Hockey Now on Sunday. If he becomes available in the trade market, I can't see how Sweeney doesn't at least try to get him. The rest of the article goes over just the situation. It talks about everything we had talked about before, how Stamkos wanted the extension done during the summer, how he had already expressed to the Lightning that he wanted the extension done, and how there were no talks. I really don't think it's worth repeating because we had talked about it so much, but yeah, the guy wanted the extension, the Tampa Bay Lightning said no, and then Julien Brisebois came out there and said that we're going to wait until the end of the season to start negotiating or thinking about negotiating because we want to evaluate our team throughout the season first before committing extra dollars to Tampa's captain. Not that he's a bad player, it's just they need to evaluate whether or not his services going forward are what they actually need. The article then concludes at the bottom here by saying this: by all accounts, for the second time in his illustrious career, the 33-year-old future Hall of Famer and 2-time Stanley Cup champion is set to becoming a UFA next July. Will the Bruins come knocking on the NHL trade market if he becomes available, or will they do so if and when Stamkos becomes a UFA? The article doesn't really talk about anything relating Boston and Stamkos other than the NHL source that says, oh yeah, they'd probably go after him. It doesn't go over hypothetical lines, it just kind of brings the idea up. For even more analysis, we're going over onto Spectre's Hockey from October 16th, because what Lyle Richardson did was he talked about this same idea, this idea brought up in the Boston Hockey Now article, and then he goes out there and writes this: Jimmy Murphy of Boston Hockey Now is assuming that Stamkos appears set on becoming a UFA next summer. We cannot rule out that possibility, given the Lightning's cap constraints, but I don't consider it a certainty. Brisebois will attempt to sign Stamkos and could get creative as he's always done to free up the necessary cap space to retain a core player. Stamkos came close to hitting the open market in 2016, but decided to stay in Tampa Bay. The Lightning then won Stanley Cups, and he was there as the captain, so yeah, pretty good choice. Despite Stamkos' disappointment over a lack of contract talks over the summer, his first choice remains to finish his playing career in Tampa. A lot can happen between now and next July, but I'm not assuming that he's heading to the market until the two sides have had an opportunity to discuss a new contract. As for trading him this season, it's another possibility I don't dismiss, but also one that I don't anticipate taking place. Brisebois made it clear that he and Stamkos are focused on winning the Stanley Cup this season. Unless things go awry for the Lightning, I don't see them shopping their captain at the trade deadline unless he asks to be moved. Part of this is because Stamkos does have a full no-movement clause, so any sort of a trade would have to be approved by him, and based off of the comments he had made at the start of training camp, he really wants to stay in Tampa. He's disappointed that him and Tampa had not conversed about a contract, not that he's not going to stick around. He wants to stick around, and he's been very clear about that. So, even though there could be some sort of souring of emotions because there were no contract talks and the Lightning admitted that they're going to take their time and not talk about an extension right away, it doesn't change, likely, the idea that Stamkos just simply wants to remain a Lightning. He is just disappointed in how the means to accomplishing that have been prohibited so far. Does that necessarily mean that he'll go to free agency, he won't sign, or that he will waive his no-move to get traded elsewhere before the season ends? Not necessarily. So, this idea of Boston being a destination is really all contingent on whether or not Stamkos' situation with Tampa gets so sour that all of a sudden he does not want to stick around there anymore after expressing his utmost interest in doing so. You know, Julien Brisebois would probably want to keep him around, but the entire extension conversation, it's all dependent on how good Stamkos is going to be in the future. Obviously, he's a good player. You'd be better with him on your team than not. But how much is he going to ask for? How much is he going to demand? And how long is that contract going to be? These are the factors that Julien Brisebois wants to watch this season's worth of hockey playing for in order to determine those numbers. He doesn't want to make any premature decisions in doing that just yet. So at the end of the day, Steven Stamkos, whether his future is in Tampa or not, you can't deny that he is a guy that has expressed his utmost desire to stay there. If Boston comes knocking at the door, if things get so sour that you have no choice but for other teams to enter the conversation and ask around, then hey, maybe Don Sweeney is the guy to get it done. Maybe there is a big trade where the Bruins sent over some of their very few prospects to Tampa Bay. Or they shell out some extra money to get a guy like Stamkos who will be in his aging center years while also producing a lot of points. Taking away the age aspect out of it, could you imagine a Stamkos, Marchand, and Pastrnak line? Like, that does not even sound real, to be honest. I mean, the goal-scoring talent of both Stamkos and Pastrnak, who are you going to pass to on the power play? Are these guys going to share that left flank? Some guys going to be at the point instead? I mean, there are a lot of options to go with your flexibility here if you wanted to have a guy like Stamkos as your trigger man, but at the end of the day, you still have some other great players on Boston as well. It's just a matter of time as to whether or not you get that replacement that is a top-tier center to replace the minutes that Patrice Bergeron is leaving off the team now, right? So, Boston fans, I want you to let me know in the comments, is Stamkos that guy? And if he is, would you rather him be acquired in free agency next year with the opportunity for him to sign elsewhere, or would you be okay with just making a trade? If it's a trade, what is the most you would be willing to give up in this kind of a deal? If you're a Tampa fan, what would you want in return for Stamkos, and do you think it's actually plausible that he waives his no-move and gets sent away before the deadline? Prohibiting this entire free agent thing to happen with Tampa Bay, you lose him out for free, whatever. You don't want to do that. You want to lose him for assets. You want to get some stuff back. What is it from Boston that you would like in a Stamkos trade that you would feel is acceptable enough to say yes to? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below if you're a Bruins and or a Lightning fan. Thoughts on Stamkos and the Tampa Bay Lightning. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.